sunshine. That's the sunshine.
Hang on a second, Hans. I want to thank Hans for being here with us today, and I also wanted you to know that we're celebrating with Hans also, because just this last week or the week
Last
before?
week, yeah.
Last week, Hans became a U.S. citizen.
Thank you.
Thank you. Blessings. Oh, he took his oath, and he's just he blessed our country by becoming a citizen. Thank you, Mom. Yay. Hans is actually a friend that we knew and played for us up at Unity in Woodinville, and he's moved to Dallas, and so I actually several times said, when are you coming down? We wanted you to come play for us. So we're very grateful for you to come and bringing out some sunshine for us today, and I thank all of you for being here and coming and celebrating our adventuresome experience and our journey as we move into having more of a consistent place for us to meet. You can see that there's a probably good need for that these days. And we thank Leanne again for helping us to come and celebrate on this beautiful day and be a part of this and sharing the wonderful space that she has here. How many of you have, I made something of a little bit of probably a little tactical error this last week. And I turned on the television, on the news, and you know, I found. Anybody notice that there's a lot of drama going on in the world these days? Anybody notice that? Yeah, it's kind of interesting to notice that there's a lot of drama going on. It seems like, and I found myself. Someone said this morning, I found myself kind of getting caught up in a lot of the drama of it. Getting caught up in the energy and the emotions and the feelings of frustration and just at times just being aghast at some of the things that I am seeing on the news. And then I remembered some of my lessons that I've said, before, that's probably not one of the best things in the world to do, but but it occurred to me that it's a great opportunity for us to begin to really practice and work with some of our spiritual principles. And it was a good opportunity for me to remind myself of our spiritual principles and the things that we talk about very consistently in Unity, and to talk about them in a way that helps us to really recognize the value of a particular way of seeing in life. And it's sometimes not an easy thing to do, but it really is a part of what is a spiritual practice, isn't it? It's part of what really we talk about. There was a story, some children were lined up in the cafeteria of a Catholic elementary school for lunch, and at the head of the table was a large pile of apples. And the man made a note and posted it on an apple tray and said, "Take only one, God is watching." And moving further along the lunch line, at the other end of the table was a large pile of chocolate chip cookies. And a child had written a note, you could see it in a childish hand-like scrawl, it said, "Take all you want, God is watching the apples." Well, this kind of, to me, points out a need to kind of shift our worldview a little bit and to look a little bit beyond a limited understanding and awareness of the presence of God in our lives. And our first principle that we talk about, and we have them in our bulletin almost every Sunday. Who's got a bulletin with you? I think they're on the back of it today, aren't they? There's 5 principles that Unity talks about. And one of the things I want to say and share, that we sometimes get up and I've noticed that some of our, and this is not to pick on any of our platform people, I've been meaning to actually have a little talk with them about this, because one of the things I've been hearing them say at times is Unity has 5 things that we believe. And I'm going to suggest to you that's not true. These are not necessarily beliefs that we have. These are spiritual principles that we found actually do work in our lives. And they're a way of looking and understanding life. And so they're not necessarily a set of beliefs that you have to have in order to be in unity, but it's just these are some of the foundational principles out of which our teachings come. And they're a great way of helping us to kind of succinctly understand what's the underlying awarenesses that are at the heart of the teaching. So they're really a teaching. They're not necessarily, we don't want to give the wrong impression that these are dogma or that you have to believe these in order to participate in this, but they are very practical ways of seeing and understanding life. And one of the first one is that there's only one presence and one power, God, the absolute good. Now, there's different ways that we say this, and I don't have the bulletin in front of me, so I'm using one that I have worked with a lot. Actually, someone hand me a bulletin. Oh, here's one right here. Make sure I got one. Yeah, that's good. Thank you. Yeah, so the way it's read in our bulletin is God is the source and creator of all. There is no other enduring power. God is good and present everywhere. God is good and present everywhere. So God's not only watching the apples, but God is watching the cookies also. So so that's one way of looking at it, but not in a judgmental way, because we know that there's really only one presence, one power in the universe, and that presence and power is the presence of love. And if we really begin to recognize that, it's important for us to look beyond a lot of the things that tend to separate us. And that's one of the things that I think probably is needed in our world more than anything today, is to really, that ability to, in our own heart and mind, to look beyond our limited awareness and vision of the presence of God in our lives. In Matthew chapter 19, verse 17, and he said unto them, Why callest thou me good? There is none good but one, and that is God. And so one of the things that Jesus was telling us is that there really is only one presence, and that presence is good. And don't necessarily look to other things, and even Him for that matter, for that experience of good, but recognize that there really is one source that all of us connect to, that is the source of that good. And that good is actually in all places and in all circumstances. In Psalms 139:7, Where can I go from your spirit, and where can I flee from your presence? If I go up to the heavens, you are there. If I make my bed in the depths, you are there. If I rise on the wings of the dawn, if I settle on the far side of the sea, even there your hand will guide me. Your right hand will hold me fast. If I say, Surely the darkness will hide me, and the light become night around me, even the darkness will not be dark to you. The night will shine like the day, for darkness is as light to you. For you created my inmost being. You knit me together in my mother's womb. I praise you because I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Your works are wonderful, and I know that full well. My frame was not hidden from you when I was made in the secret place, when I was woven together in the depths of earth. Your eyes saw my unformed body. All the days ordained for me were written in your book before one of them came to be. How precious you are to me, and how precious are your thoughts, O God. How vast is the sum of them. Were I to count them, they would outnumber the grains of sand. And when I awake, I am still in you. I love that psalm. It's just so beautifully poetic and just speaks so much to the awareness that we live and move and have our being in the presence of the divine. And so when we find ourselves in a situation or circumstance, anybody ever had any drama in your own life? What's the laughter about? What? We all have had drama, don't we? And what someone said this morning, I just gave me a wonderful tip this morning of they gave me this wonderful line of I learned not to drink the Kool-Aid. I'm learning not to drink the Kool-Aid. We get hooked into these dramatic experiences in our lives, and it's so important for us to recognize that part of what we're doing is Pema Chodron has this wonderful work out there called Don't Bite the Hook. And these dramatic things that go on in life are one of the ways that we find ourselves getting hooked into those energies and getting hooked into what really doesn't serve us and it doesn't serve the situation. It doesn't necessarily resolve the drama, does it? And so the more we can find ourselves staying clear and centered in this understanding and awareness that even in the midst of all of the drama that can go on in life, there really is something higher at work. And it's really valuable for us to take the time to notice and shift our awareness to recognize that even in those that we have difficulty seeing as being in the presence of God, that yes, the presence of God does work in them in some form, in some way, and we are not perhaps able to see how that unfolds or what good can and will come out of that, but we know that ultimately there is some good that can and work out of each of these circumstances and situations. Now, I have to be honest with you, I have some very clear ideas about how that good is supposed to work out. I suspect we all do, right? And part of my waking up is to recognize that my awareness of how that good is supposed to work out may or may not be the best for everything and for everyone involved, and may not be the highest and best. And so it's important for me to recognize that even though I have a clear awareness of what I think is the highest and best good, it's valuable to be aware that there's perhaps ways that I'm not able to see, and be open to that possibility, and to be able to let go in such a way that I can really hold this knowing that regardless of whether it works out the way that I think it's supposed to, that there is some good that can and will come out of this circumstance and situation for the greater good for all involved. The second principle that we talk about in unity is to recognize that there's a divinity, that the divinity of God is within each and every one of us, that we are all inherently good. And the real practice is learning to let go of and look beyond the exceptions. You know the exceptions, right? You know those ones that there's only one presence and one power except in them. Remember those guys? Yeah. Well, part of our work is to recognize that we need to see beyond the exceptions. See, we are spiritual beings, as it says, and we are created in God's image. That Spirit of God lives within each and every person, and therefore all people are inherently good. I'm actually absolutely convinced that even those people who are acting insane are doing so because on some level they are trying to meet some experience and some need of good in their life. And even though they do things that you and I would find really very, we wouldn't call that good, the underlying intent is to bring forth something that they believe to be good in their lives. And so a part of our unfolding is to recognize that at the heart of every action, ultimately, there is one of two things. The Course in Miracles says there's either love or fear, but the Course also says that there's really only one, that fear doesn't really exist. Oftentimes when Jesus talked about Satan, the devil, what he referred to as Satan, as the devil, he said that the devil is a liar and the father of lies. And so, to me, metaphysically, what that means is when something is a liar and the father of lies, and he goes on to say, and there is no truth in him. This is a metaphorical way of understanding that really there is no such thing as this idea of a devil or Satan. That there's no truth in him means that it really doesn't, that's not true. There's no truth in this idea. So part of our waking up is to recognize that even those things that we have what I would call demonized, ultimately we need to recognize that even in those things that we have projected out this belief system that there's some evil happening, if we can really begin to shift and recognize that ultimately there is something that is trying to work out that we don't comprehend, we can actually be a part of helping to shift that awareness and that energy in such a way that some good can and will come out of those circumstances and situations. So that's part of our stretching, really, in many ways, is to be able to see, even in those that we don't recognize as the presence of the divine, that the presence of the divine is in them, and as we hold that awareness for them, we make it available for them to actually be able to see and experience that on a different level as well. We become catalysts for that knowing of something greater and more, a greater good, a presence of love to unfold in some way. there's a story about a doctor that died and was sitting at the gates of heaven waiting for a space to open up so that he could go in and finally go in and see God. And while he was waiting, a guy in a white coat ran out of heaven. And then the guy, a few minutes later, returned and went right back in. And the guy, doctor, was kind of upset about this. He says, well, why is it, this guy, talked to the gatekeeper, and he says, why is it this guy's able to just come out and go back in whenever he wants to? And how come I'm having to sit here and wait? And I says, he says, that guy, that's God. He just likes to play doctor. I think it was a good story because it's important for us to recognize that there is a presence of the divine in all of us. And God is just playing doctor and playing lawyer and playing politician. And, and it's important for us to recognize that there is some presence and some power at work even in those things that don't seem to be. And the more we can recognize that, the more we actually help bring about the unfoldment of that in a way that is bringing about another experience of love in the circumstance and situations. And so part of our work is to hold that understanding. Meister Eckhart says this: being is God's circle. And in this circle, all creatures exist. Everything that is in God is God. Everything that is in God is God. In some form, in some way, there is a presence of the divine that is there for all of us to know and experience. And Emerson says, the currents of the universal being circulate through me. I am part and parcel of God. And that's true for each and every one of us, that we are all in that presence and power. And so part of our process, one of the tips that kind of helps us to recognize that is to, first of all, there really is only one presence and one power. And that's true even in those that we find that we want to separate from, that we feel like there's an exception to. And the more we can begin to say, okay, well, I don't quite see it, I'm not sure I understand it, but I'm open to the possibility that there's something wonderful and divine in this other person and even in this experience in my life. And then the third principle, we believe in the creative process, that our thoughts, our words, our beliefs help to shape our reality. We teach that there really is a creative process that's at work in all of us, and that we create our life experiences through our way of thinking and feeling, and that our energies are participating in that creative process. I think this is one of the most significant and valuable of our unity principles that we work with, because it really gives us an understanding that we are a part and parcel of what is we are helping to create the situations and circumstances in our lives, that we are not victim to those. That ultimately, the way I like to say it is that we either create or we promote or we allow whatever is going on in our life. And what that does is automatically, when we recognize that and are willing to accept that, then we move out of feeling like we are at the mercy of circumstances and that we have some part that we can play in making those circumstances different. That we can actually begin to shift the energy. And we can only do that not by trying to resist what is, not trying to change what's already been created. I talked about this last week in terms of the ripple effects. What already is, already is. We've already created it. And so it's important for us to recognize not to resist what already is, but begin in this moment, right now, to recognize that we are in this time, right now, creating what's going to happen next. Creating the experiences of what's moving into our future. And that only by paying attention to that and choosing the way the types and the ways and the focus of our awareness and our thinking, do we then participate in a conscious way to create circumstances that bring forth more of that presence of love in our lives, more of that presence of the divine. Yoga Berra once said, baseball is 90% physical and the other half is mental. So it's important for us to recognize that there's a process that works in each one of us. And I also love this one from Garrison Keillor. He says, beauty isn't worth thinking about. What's important is your mind. You don't want a $50 haircut on a 50-cent head. Sometimes I think that my haircut is a little more than my head, if you know what I mean. Virgil, back in BC 70:19, said, "Mind moves matter." So this is not a new idea, is it? We talk about new thought, but this is not new thought. This is actually a philosophy and understanding, a way of seeing life in the world that is ancient, that's been around for a long time. Emerson said, "Great men are they who see that spiritual is stronger than any material force, any thoughts, and that thoughts rule the world." And so there's another wonderful principle that we talk about and teach in Unity, that there really is a power, that thoughts are creative, and that we believe that our affirmative prayer, our affirmative way of speaking and practicing helps to bring about even more of what it is that we are wanting to see and experience in our lives. There's a power in affirmative prayer which we believe increases our connection to the divine. And then there's also an important practice that we have, which is that we can tap into and experience more of what we call the divine thoughts by practicing quiet and meditation and turning within. There's a wonderful story in Reader's Digest. It was talking about Aunt Karen, Aunt Karen is the mother of two very high-spirited young girls. And when called one morning, our conversation was constantly being interrupted by the din of kids screaming and chasing each other and yelling. And Karen says, "Could you hold on a moment?" And she finally said, and then she put the phone down, and then within a few seconds, you could hear that there was absolute silence. And then Aunt Karen came on the phone and says, "Okay, I'm back." And this person, Steve, said, "But it's so quiet. I mean, you must have complete control over those two." "Well, no, not really. I'm actually in the closet." Well, I think that about that in terms of our thoughts. Sometimes our thoughts, we don't necessarily feel like we have absolute control of our thoughts a lot of times, but part of our spiritual work is to go into the closet. That's what Jesus said, wasn't it? When you pray, go into your closet and close the door. Sometimes we need to go into that stillness and that quiet space within ourselves so that we can truly connect with the presence of the divine. And then what we'll find is that our thoughts begin to simmer and calm and begin to go in a flow that is more positive and more creative. We're able to see and experience the presence of God in circumstances and situations beyond all of the mind chatter that's going on in life. And so that's one of the most valuable parts of Unity, I think, is really that understanding that as we go within, it has an effect on bringing forth those kinds of thoughts and a way of thinking that moves us into a positive experience in living. And then the fifth principle is that knowledge of these principles is not enough. We must live them. So it's about practice. Unity is really, in many ways, and these 5 principles are a spiritual practice. And so we find ourselves in situations and circumstances in life where there seems to be a lot of drama. It's really valuable just to go down the list of these 5 principles and ask those questions. Well, what's really here? Well, there's only one presence and one power in this circumstance. There's presence and power in me, and that presence and power is in those that I'm in the drama with. And it's important, as we recognize that, it will actually begin to shift our awareness and our energy. When we pay attention and notice, okay, well, what are the thoughts and feelings in me that are participating in helping to set up this drama? What's the nature and the way that I have been looking at this circumstance or situation that's helping to actually fuel it rather than be able to shift it into a knowing of something greater, of a greater experience of love. And then speaking those words from a place within us of stillness and quiet, listening to our guidance, and then the very most important part of this is listening to our guidance, speaking the words of truth, but then taking steps, taking actions in our life that really enhance that knowing of that presence. And sometimes that may mean that we decide not to say some of the things that we planned on saying. Does that make sense? And sometimes it means that we don't do some of the things that we thought we were going to do. Sometimes it means really listening to what would be the highest and best for me and for everyone in this circumstance and situation, and then taking those steps and saying those things that really will actually enhance this knowing of connection, enhance this knowing of oneness, enhance this knowing of the presence of God in life. So in James chapter 2, verse 26, as the body without the spirit is dead, so faith without works is dead also. And so part of our affirming of these principles is to use these as a spiritual practice in our lives. And when we find ourselves getting caught up in the drama, whether it be the drama in Washington or the drama down the street or the drama right here in our home, if we can really remind ourselves of these 5 steps, these 5 principles, they can really be valuable tools for helping us to move back into a knowing of the presence of God in us and in our lives. So there's a short little synopsis of those 5 principles. If you would like to really delve deeper into these 5 principles and the significance and where they come from and how they can be played out in life in a positive way, in your life, there's a wonderful book out there from Ellen Davenport called The 5 Principles, and I would really invite anyone or recommend anyone who wanted to delve into these more and to really get a deeper experience and awareness of how they can be practically used in life. It's a wonderful resource for you. So there's your homework for this week. Practice those 5 principles whenever you find yourself confronted with drama. Not that anybody has any drama naturally, but if you did, just happen to have some, then this is a great little practical steps that you can take using these 5 principles in a very quick and easy way to shift awareness, to shift energy. And so having that be said, let's move into we're going to do a song and then we'll move into our meditation time.
Letting go, letting go, letting go, letting go, letting go.
So let's take a nice deep breath now. And as you breathe in, let it go. And just allow that breath to flow in and out. Allow yourself to feel that flow of spirit, of breath. Breathing in the fresh air, breathing in the light and sunshine, breathing out, knowing that there really is only one presence here. That presence is in all of us. That presence is flowing and we are participating in creating more of the presence of love and the experience of that presence of love by holding that awareness in our thoughts and feelings. We hold that awareness in our thoughts and feelings and we speak forth the knowing. I am in the presence of love. I invite you to say that with me. I am in the presence of love. I am an expression of love. Together? I am an expression of love. Love is healing me and the world now. Together? Love is healing me and the world now. We speak forth these words knowing that there is a great power in knowing the truth, of holding to these understandings. And we practice this knowing as we go through the different experiences of our life. Thank you, Blessed Spirit, for this way of seeing, of knowing how we can reconnect, and for allowing us to be instruments of God's love and light in our world. Thank you, thank you, thank you, Blessed Spirit. Take a nice deep breath and gently open your eyes and give thanks. And so it is.